Conclusions that we found, mostly that people are more receptive to the ideas of Marxism and or communism when they don't realize that they're talking about Marxism. That they, in their own personal lives, come to those same conclusions that, you know, work's terrible, or, you know, I don't feel like I can move up even though I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. But once you say Marx, they're like, oh my God. Also, if there were to be a communist revolution in the United States, we found that there would first have to be a decrease in the negative connotations of Marxism. Or one of the thinkers that we studied in class, his name was C.L.R. James, he talked kind of about the how to Bolshevize America, and that you shouldn't necessarily say Marx or like teach Marx, but find instances of communism or communist thought within the popular culture and within society as it already is, as it already exists. And the economic crisis of today provides the perfect opportunity to do this as more and more people question the system of capitalism.
So thank you all for coming. If you have any questions.
What I would like to see before we end the session or open the floor up for discussion with the group, I would like to present awards to the panel for participating in this year's honored symposium. I have these awards for Caitlin Gundop,
Thank you.
Molly Schiffer, Carly Regina, Samantha Stauffer, and William Moran.
Thank you.
Thank you for your participation this year. Also, we have these lovely little mugs over here that you can take with you as consolation prizes. And now the floor is open for any questions that they might be able to answer about the presentation. Sorry.
I was curious, on survey B, I'm just curious if you have any explanation for the fact that self-described anarchists have -10. It would almost seem like they would have been on a +15 or +20.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that also had to go with the fact it was one, I actually know the survey this was, and it's in the back of my head. It was one survey, so that actually particular one, because there were so few anarchists, actually may not, first of all, have been represented in the whole anarchist population. The second thing I want to say is that, you know, we often see this divide between anarchists and communists. We actually had a discussion about this in our class a while ago, talking about how these perceptions, and there's sometimes of a divide and kind of a fighting between these two groups, when in reality, the outcome and what should happen after the revolution maybe, they may differ there in the state's place, at least for a while. But the actual idea that, you know, we have a problem with the current hegemony of the society, that we need a revolution, these are things that are consistent kind of between the two things. Having said that, this person, the anarchist, did say that we needed a revolution, and they did happen to have a positive score on some of the more aspects that were directly Marxist, or that were similar between the two philosophies, I guess.
Yeah, I would like to add something to that, though. We actually had, I think it was 3 anarchists, and that still happened to -10. And honestly, that blows my mind because, like, one of the questions asks, do you support the abolition of private property? You would think most anarchists would agree with that. Do you think that there should be a revolution? Again, you would think most anarchists would think that. So maybe it was a joke. Maybe they were just putting anarchists because they just want it to be special, or maybe they don't really know what anarchy is.
Yeah. Similarly to Carly also, there's a big distinction between identifying as an anarchist lifestyle-wise as opposed to actual political affiliation, and so there might have been some confusion over that. I know that there was one survey in particular where an individual identified as an anarchist, and they got a +20. So they were like completely on the other side of the spectrum. So I think that once again, with such a small survey of anarchists in particular, it's pretty hard to draw any real conclusions about anarchists and their decisions towards Marxism and communism.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So you talked about a lot of things that lead up to the revolution. So what do you all individually think will be a catalyst that inspires the governmental revolution?
I don't know. As far as thinking that there might be a revolution, I'm kind of pessimistic. We actually talked about this in the discussion group, that maybe Obama saved the capitalist system in the same way that FDR saved the capitalist system by moving towards maybe socializing a few things or offering redistribution of wealth. But in the same sense, there's no revolution there. There's the working class doesn't take ownership of the government or the economic system. They're just getting crumbs at the table.
In addition, a couple of the different authors that we've been discussing in the class, one in particular, Antonio Gramsci, says that ultimately what has to happen in order for a true communist revolution to take place is not only a crisis of the economic system, which is what we're seeing in the US as well as over the globe, but also a crisis of hegemony in which individuals don't feel like their leaders are representing their viewpoints anymore. And so ultimately, we would have to have something like that happen. And really, Obama's election and the turnover between Bush and Obama, and specifically Republican and liberal, or Democrat, however we want to view it, has really made people feel like it wasn't so much the system, it was just the leaders that were in place, or the political parties that were dictating the policies and that kind of thing. So that's one reason why it hasn't happened, and a potential reason why it might not happen. But really what would have to happen in order for a communist revolution to occur would be that crisis of hegemony.
And I wanted to add one more thing to that. One of the authors who we studied, James, he talked about Americanism, basically the idea that a lot of times in America, we can think of it like the American dream. A lot of times in America we have the concept that, rising from dirt, up to the riches, being able to, exactly, rising up on the rooftops, thank you, and being able to come up in society. And because of this belief, and this is really a huge part of the American dream, I think it's hard to get people to separate them really into two camps, into the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, because people a lot of times feel like they will be able to become part of the class, so they don't want to necessarily destroy a system that they think that one day they can also be rich. So.
I was wondering where the term communism was derived from.
Well, Marx, I think Marx actually coined the term communism, and it was in some of his later writings. In his very early works, he didn't quite use that term yet, but I believe it was Marx and Engels that were the first ones to start using that term, and it might have been the Communist Manifesto as the first instance of that.
Yeah, and if I were to guess, I would say like the whole, like the root or the prefix of the word, like the whole idea of community, that it's a community of workers.
Is socialism and communism the same thing?
No. The reason why we use them pretty interchangeably in this is because the perceptions as far as Marxism, communism, and socialism all tend to be along the same lines. And so in order to kind of reveal that, we use those interchangeably as well.
And is bourgeois and bourgeoisie, do they mean the same thing?
One's just a plural.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you all.